بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. اللهم إني أسألك برحمتك التي وسعت كل شيء وبقوتك التي قهرت بها كل شيء وخضع لها كل شيء وذل لها كل شيء وبجبروتك التي غلبت بها كل شيء وبعزتك التي لا يقوم لها شيء وبعظمتك التي ملأت كل شيء وبسلطانك الذي على كل شيء وبوجهك الباقي بعد فناء كل شيء وبأسمائك التي ملأت أركان كل شيء وبعلمك الذي أحاط بكل شيء وبنور وجهك الذي أضاء له كل شيء. يا نور يا قدوس يا أول الأولين ويا آخر الآخرين. اللهم اغفر لي الذنوب التي تهتك العصام. اللهم اغفر لي الذنوب التي تنزل النقم. اللهم اغفر لي الذنوب التي تغير النعم. اللهم اغفر لي الذنوب التي تحبس الدعاء. اللهم اغفر لي الذنوب التي تقطع الرجاء. اللهم اغفر لي الذنوب التي تنزل البلاء. اللهم اغفر لي كل ذنب أذنبته وكل خطيئة أخطأتها. اللهم إني أتقرب إليك بذكرك وأستشفع بك إلى نفسك وأسألك بجودك أن تدنيني من قربك وأن توزعني شكرك وأن تلهمني ذكرك. اللهم إني أسألك سؤال خاضع متدلل خاشع أن تسامحني وترحمني وتجعلني بقسمك راضيا قانعا وفي جميع الأحوال متواضعا. اللهم وأسألك سؤال من اشتدت فاقته وانزل بك عند الشدائد حاجته وعظم فيما عندك رغبته. اللهم عظم سلطانك وعلى مكانك وخفي مكرك وظهر أمرك وغلب قهرك وجرت قدرتك ولا يمكن الفرار من حكومتك. اللهم لا أجد لذنوبي غافرا ولا لقبائحي ساترا ولا لشيء من عملي القبيح بالحسن مبدلا غيرك. لا إله إلا أنت سبحانك وبحمدك. ظلمت نفسي وتجرأت بجهلي وسكنت إلى قديم ذكرك لي ومنك علي. اللهم مولاي كم من قبيح سترته وكم من فادح من البلاء أقلته وكم من عثار وقيتا، وكم من مكروه دفعتا، وكم من ثناء جميل لست أهلا له نشرتا. اللهم عظم بلائي وأفرت بي سوء حالي، وقصرت بي عمالي، وكعدت بي أغلالي، وحبسني عن نفعي بعد أملي، وخدعتني الدنيا بغرورها، ونفسي بجنايتها ومطالي. يا سيدي فأسألك بعزتك ألا يحجب عنك الدعاء سوء عملي وفعالي، ولا تفضحني بخفي ما اطلعت عليه من سري، ولا تعاجلني بالعقوبة على ما عملته في خلواتي من سوء فعلي وإساءتي ودوام تفريطي وجهالتي وكثرة شهواتي وغفلتي. وكن اللهم بعزتك لي في كل الأحوال رؤوفا، وعلي في جميع الأمور عطوفا. إلهي وربي من لي غيرك، أسأله كشف الضر والنظر في أمري. إلهي ومولاي أجريت علي حكما اتبعت فيه هوى نفسي، ولم أحترس فيه من تزيين عدوي، فغرني بما أهواه وأسعده على ذلك القضاء، فتجاوزت بما جرى علي من ذلك بعد حدودك، وخالفت بعد أوامرك، فلك الحمد علي في جميع ذلك، ولا حجة لي فيما جرى علي فيه قضاءك، والزمني حكمك وبلاغك. وقد أتيتك يا إلهي بعد تقصيري وإسرافي على نفسي، معتذرا نادما منكسرا مستقيلا مستغفرا منيبا مكرا مدعنا معترفا، لا أجد مفر مما كان مني، ولا مفزعا أتوجه إليه في أمري غير قبولك عذري، ودخالك إياي في سعة رحمتك. اللهم فاقبل عذري وارحم شدة ضري، وفكني من شد وثاقي. يا رب ارحم ضعف بدني ورقة جلدي ودقة عظمي، يا من بدأ خلقي وذكري وتربيتي وبري وتغذيتي، هبني لابتداء كرمك وسال في برك بي. يا إلهي وسيدي وربي، أتراك معذبي بنارك بعد توحيدك، وبعد من طوى عليه قلبي من معرفتك، ولهج به لساني من ذكرك واعتقده ضميري من حبك، وبعد صدق اعتراف ودعائي خاضعا لربوبيتك. هيهات أنت أكرم من أن تضيع من رب ربيته، أو تبعد من أدنيته، أو تشرد من آويته، أو تسلم إلى البلاء من كفيته ورحمته. وليت شعري يا سيدي وإلهي ومولاي، أتسلط النار على وجوه خرت لعظمتك ساجدا، وعلى ألسن نطقت بتوحيدك صادقا، وبشكرك مادحا، وعلى قلوب اعترفت بإلهيتك محققا، وعلى ضمائر حوت من العلم بك حتى صارت خاشعة، وعلى جوارح سعت إلى أوطان تعبدك طائعا، وأشارت باستغفارك مدعنا ما هكذا ظن بك، ولا أخبرنا بفضلك عنك يا كريم. يا ربي، وأنت تعلم ضعفي عن قليل من بلاء الدنيا وعقوباتها، وما يجري فيها من المكاره على أهلها، على أن ذلك بلاء ومكروه، قليل مكثور، يسير بقاؤه، قصير مدته، فكيف احتمالي لبلاء الآخرة وجليل وقوع المكاره فيها، وهو بلاء تطول مدته ويدوم مقامه، ولا يخفف عن أهله، لأنه لا يكون إلا عن غضبك وانتقامك وسخطك، وهذا ما لا تقوم له السماوات والأرض. يا سيدي، فكيف لي وأنا عبدك الضعيف الدليل الحقير المسكين المستكين. يا إلهي وربي وسيدي ومولاي، لأي الأمور إليك أشكو، ولما منها أضج وأبكي، لأليم العذاب وشدته أم لطول البلاء ومدته؟ فلئن صيرتني للعقوبات مع عدائك، وجمعت بيني وبين أهل بلائك، وفرقت بيني وبين حبائك وأوليائك، فهبني يا إلهي وسيدي ومولاي وربي، صبرت على عذابك، فكيف أصبر على فراقك؟ وهبني يا إلهي، صبرت على حر نارك، فكيف أصبر عن النظر إلى كرامتك؟ أم كيف أسكن في النار ورجاء عفوك؟ فبعزتك يا سيدي ومولاي أقسم صادقا، لن تركتني ناطقا، لأضجن إليك بين أهلها ضجيج الآملين، ولأصرخن إليك صراخ المستصرخين، ولأبكين عليك بكاء الفاقدين، ولا أنادينك أين كنت يا ولي المؤمنين، يا غاية آمال العارفين، يا غياث المستغيثين، يا حبيب قلوب الصادقين، ويا إله العالمين. أفتراك سبحانك يا إلهي وبحمدك تسمع فيها صوت عبد مسلم سجن فيها بمخالفته، وذاق طعم عذابها بمعصيته، وهبس بين أطباقها بجرمه وجريرته، وهو يضج إليك ضجيجا مؤمل لرحمتك، ويناديك بلسان أهل توحيدك، ويتوسل إليك بربوبيتك. يا مولاي، فكيف يبقى في العذاب وهو يرجو ما سلف من حلمك؟ أم كيف تؤلمه النار وهو يأمل فضلك ورحمتك؟ أم كيف يحرقه لهيبها وأنت تسمع صوته وترى مكانه؟ أم كيف يشتمل عليه زفيرها وأنت تعلم ضعفا؟ أم كيف يتقلقل بين أطباقها وأنت تعلم صدقا؟ أم كيف تزجره زبانيتها وهو يناديك يا رباه؟ أم كيف يرجو فضلك في عتكه منها فتتركه فيها؟ هيهات، ما ذلك ظن بك، ولا المعروف من فضلك، ولا مشبه لما عاملت به الموحدين من برك وإحسانك. فباليقين أخطأ لولا ما حكمت به من تعذيب جاحدك، وقضيت به من إخلاد معاندك، فجعلت النار كلها بردا وسلاما، وما كانت لأحد فيها مكرا ولا مقاما، لكنك تقدست أسماؤك، أقسمت أن تملأها من الكافرين من الجنة والناس أجمعين، وأن تخلد فيها المعاندين، وأن تجل ثناؤك، قلت مبتدئا وتطولت بالإنعام متكرما، أفمن كان مؤمنا كمن كان فاسقا لا يستوون. إلهي وسيدي، فأسألك بالقدرة التي قدرتها، وبالقضية التي حتمتها وحكمتها، وغلبت من عليه أجريتها، أن تهب لي في هذه الليلة وفي هذه الساعة كل جرم أجرمته، وكل ذنب أذنبته، وكل قبيح أسررته، وكل جهل عملته، كتمته أو أعلنته، أخفيته أو أظهرته، وكل سيئة أمرت بإثباتها الكرام الكاتبين الذين وكلتهم بحفظ ما يكون مني، وجعلتهم شهودا علي مع جوارحي، وكنت أنت الرقيب علي من ورائهم والشاهد لما خفي عنهم، وبرحمتك أخفيتا، وبفضلك سترتا، وأن توفر حظي من كل خير أنزلتا، أو إحسان فضلتا، أو بر نشرتا، أو رزق بسطتا، أو ذنب تغفروه، أو خطأ تستروه. يا ربي يا ربي يا رب، يا إلهي وسيدي ومولاي ومالك رقي، يا من بيده ناصيتي، يا عليما بذري ومسكنتي، يا خبيرا بفقري وفاقتي. يا ربي يا ربي يا رب، أسألك بحقك وقدسك وعظم صفاتك وأسمائك أن تجعل أوقاتي في الليل والنهار بذكرك معمورا وبخدمتك موصولا وعمالي عندك مقبولا، حتى تكون أعمالي وأورادي كلها وردا واحدا وحالي في خدمتك سرمدا. يا سيدي يا من عليه معولي، يا من إليه شكوت أحوالي، يا ربي يا ربي يا رب، قو على خدمتك جوارحي واشدد على العزيمة جوانحي، وهب لي الجد في خشيتك والدوام في الاتصال بخدمتك حتى أصرح إليك في ميادين السابقين وأسرع إليك في المبادرين واشتاق إلى قربك في المشتاقين ودنو منك دنو المخلصين وخافك مخافة الموقنين واجتمع في جوارك مع المؤمنين. اللهم ومن أرادني بسوء فأرد ومن كادني فكد، واجعلني من أحسن عبيدك نصيبا عندك واقربهم منزلة منك وخصهم زلفة لديك، فإنه لا ينال ذلك إلا بفضلك، وجدني بجودك وعطف علي بمجدك واحفظني برحمتك، واجعل لساني بذكرك لهجا وقلبي بحبك متيما، ومن علي بحسن إجابتك وقلني أثرتي واغفر زلتي، فإنك قضيت على عبادك بعبادتك وأمرتهم بدعائك وضمنت لهم الإجابة. فإليك يا ربي نصبت وجهي، وإليك يا ربي مددت يدي، فبعزتك استجب لي دعائي وبلغني مناي، ولا تقطع من فضلك الرجاء، واكفني شر الجن والإنس من أعدائي. يا سريع الرضا اغفر لمن لا يملك إلا الدعاء، فإنك فعال لما تشاء، يا من اسمه دواء وذكره شفاء وطاعته غنى، ارحم من رأس ماله الرجاء وسلاحه البكاء، يا سابغ النعم يا دافع النقام، يا نور المستوحشين في الظلام، يا عالما لا يعلم، صل على محمد وآل محمد وفعل بما أنت أهله، وصلى الله على رسوله والأئمة الميامين من آله وسلم تسليما كثيرا.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. ياسين والقرآن الحكيم إنك لمن المرسلين على صراط مستقيم، تنزيل العزيز الرحيم لتنذر قوما ما أنذر آباؤهم فهم غافلون لقد حق القول على أكثرهم فهم لا يؤمنون إنا جعلنا في أعناقهم أغلالا فهي إلى الأذقان فهم مقمحون وجعلنا من بين أيديهم سدا ومن خلفهم سدا فأغشيناهم فهم لا يبصرون وسواء عليهم أأنذرتهم أم لم تنذرهم لا يؤمنون إنما تنذر من اتبع الذكر وخشي الرحمن بالغيب فبشره بمغفرة وأجر كريم إنا نحن نحيي الموتى ونكتب ما قدموا وآثارهم وكل شيء أحصيناه في إمام مبين وضرب لهم مثلا أصحاب القرية إذ جاءها المرسلون إذ أرسلنا إليهم 2 فكذبوهما فعززنا بثالث فقالوا إنا إليكم مرسلون قالوا ما أنتم إلا بشر مثلنا وما أنزل الرحمن من شيء إن أنتم إلا تكذبون قالوا ربنا يعلم إنا إليكم لمرسلون وما علينا إلا البلاغ المبين قالوا إنا تطيرنا بكم لئن لم تنتهوا لنرجمنكم وليمسنكم منا عذاب أليم قالوا طائركم معكم أئن ذكرتم بل أنتم قوم مسرفون وجاء من أقصى المدينة رجل يسعى قال يا قوم اتبعوا المرسلين اتبعوا من لا يسألكم أجرا وهم مهتدون وما لي لا أعبد الذي فطرني وإليه ترجعون أأتخذ من دونه آلهة إن يردني الرحمن بضر لا تغن عني شفاعتهم شيئا ولا ينقذون إني إذا لفي ضلال مبين إني آمنت بربكم فاسمعون قيل ادخل الجنة قال يا ليت قومي يعلمون بما غفر لي ربي وجعلني من المكرمين وما أنزلنا على قومه من بعده من جند من السماء وما كنا منزلين إن كانت إلا صيحة واحدة فإذا هم خامدون يا حسرة على العباد ما يأتيهم من رسول إلا كانوا به يستهزئون ألم يروا كم أهلكنا قبلهم من القرون أنهم إليهم لا يرجعون وإن كل لما جميع لدينا محضرون وآية لهم الأرض الميتة أحييناها وأخرجنا منها حبا فمنه يأكلون وجعلنا فيها جنات من نخيل وأعناب وفجرنا فيها من العيون ليأكلوا من ثمره وما عملته أيديهم أفلا يشكرون سبحان الذي خلق الأزواج كلها مما تنبت الأرض ومن أنفسهم ومما لا يعلمون وآية لهم الليل نسلخ منه النهار فإذا هم مظلمون والشمس تجري لمستقر لها ذلك تقدير العزيز العليم والقمر قدرناه منازل حتى عاد كالعرجون القديم لا الشمس ينبغي لها أن تدرك القمر ولا الليل سابق النهار وكل في فلك يسبحون وآية لهم أنا حملنا ذريتهم في الفلك المشحون وخلقنا لهم من مثله ما يركبون وإن نشأ نغرقهم فلا صريخ لهم ولا هم ينقذون إلا رحمة منا ومتاعا إلى حين وإذا قيل لهم اتقوا ما بين أيديكم وما خلفكم لعلكم ترحمون وما تأتيهم من آية من آيات ربهم إلا كانوا عنها معرضين وإذا قيل لهم أنفقوا مما رزقكم الله قال الذين كفروا للذين آمنوا أنطعم من لو يشاء الله أطعمه إن أنتم إلا في ضلال مبين ويقولون متى هذا الوعد إن كنتم صادقين ما ينظرون إلا صيحة واحدة تأخذهم وهم يخصمون فلا يستطيعون توصية ولا إلى أهلهم يرجعون ونفخ في الصور فإذا هم من الأجداث إلى ربهم ينسلون قالوا يا ويلنا من بعثنا من مرقدنا هذا ما وعد الرحمن وصدق المرسلون إن كانت إلا صيحة واحدة فإذا هم جميع لدينا محضرون فاليوم لا تظلم نفس شيئا ولا تجزون إلا ما كنتم تعملون إن أصحاب الجنة اليوم في شغل فاكهون هم وأزواجهم في ظلال على الأرائك متكئون لهم فيها فاكهة ولهم ما يدعون سلام قولا من رب رحيم وامتازوا اليوم أيها المجرمون ألم أعهد إليكم يا بني آدم ألا تعبدوا الشيطان إنه لكم عدو مبين وأن اعبدوني هذا صراط مستقيم ولقد أضل منكم جبلا كثيرا أفلم تكونوا تعقلون هذه جهنم التي كنتم توعدون اصلوها اليوم بما كنتم تكفرون اليوم نختم على أفواههم وتكلمنا أيديهم وتشهد أرجلهم بما كانوا يكسبون ولو نشاء لطمسنا على أعينهم فاستبقوا الصراط فأنى يبصرون ولو نشاء لمسخناهم على مكانتهم فما استطاعوا مضيا ولا يرجعون ومن نعمره ننكسه في الخلق أفلا يعقلون وما علمناه الشعر وما ينبغي له إن هو إلا ذكر وقرآن مبين لينذر من كان حيا ويحق القول على الكافرين أولم يروا أنا خلقنا لهم مما عملت أيدينا أنعاما فهم لها مالكون وذللناها لهم فمنها ركوبهم ومنها يأكلون ولهم فيها منافع ومشارب أفلا يشكرون واتخذوا من دون الله آلهة لعلهم ينصرون لا يستطيعون نصرهم وهم لهم جند محضرون فلا يحزنك قولهم إنا نعلم ما يسرون وما يعلنون أولم ير الإنسان أنا خلقناه من نطفة فإذا هو خصيم مبين وضرب لنا مثلا ونسي خلقه قال من يحيي العظام وهي رميم قل يحييها الذي أنشأها أول مرة وهو بكل خلق عليم الذي جعل لكم من الشجر الأخضر نارا فإذا أنتم منه توقدون أوليس الذي خلق السماوات والأرض بقادر على أن يخلق مثلهم بلى وهو الخلاق العليم إنما أمره إذا أراد شيئا أن يقول له كن فيكون فسبحان الذي بيده ملكوت كل شيء وإليه ترجعون صدق الله العلي العظيم.
محمد وآل محمد صلوات. अम्मा फिजा बता दे मुझको पत्थर क्यों आ रहे हैं। अम्मा फिजा बता दे मुझको पत्थर क्यों आ रहे हैं। कैसा है ये चरागा दिल डूबे जा रहे हैं। क्या शाम आ गया है। अम्मा फिजा बता दे मुझको पत्थर क्यों आ रहे हैं। नेज़ों पे जितने सर है एक सर है उनमें ऐसा। आंखें हैं बंद उसकी اور خاک پر ہے گرتا، عباس کا یہ سر ہے تیور بتا رہے ہیں، کیا شام آ گیا ہے اما فضا، بتا دے مجھ کو پاتر کیوں آ رہے ہیں لوگ کس طرح کے ہم سے دعا کرائیں، اے قیدیو دعا دو یہ دن نہ ہم پہ آئیں، لے کر دعائیں ہم سے دل بھی دکھا رہے ہیں، کیا شام آ گیا ہے اما فضا، بتا دے مجھ کو پتھر کیوں آ رہے ہیں، ماؤں کی گودیوں سے لپٹے ہوئے ہیں بچے، ہیں ہاتھ راسیوں میں ماؤں کے ایسے جکرے، بچے جو گر رہے ہیں وہ مرتے جا رہے ہیں، کیا شام آ گیا ہے اما فضا، بتا دے مجھ کو پاتر کیوں آ رہے ہیں، ہونے لگی اذان کیسے سروں کو ڈانپے، بازو بندھے ہوئے ہیں خون رو رہی ہے آنکھیں، آنکھوں کے خون سے رستے خون میں نہا رہے ہیں، کیا شام آ گیا ہے اما فضا، بتا دے مجھ کو پتھر کیوں آ رہے ہیں، اتنا چلے ہیں پیدل کانٹوں پہ سارے قیدی، تک جاتی چلتے چلتے چلتی اگر زمین بھی، پیروں کے آبلے بھی آنسو بہا رہے ہیں، کیا شام آ گیا ہے اما فضا، بتا دے مجھ کو پاتر کیوں آ رہے ہیں اما فضا، بتا دے مجھ کو پاتر کیوں آ رہے ہیں، کیسا ہے یہ چراغاں دل ڈوبے جا رہے ہیں، کیا شام آ گیا ہے اما فضا، بتا دے مجھ کو پاتر کیوں آ رہے ہیں، بر محمد و آل محمد صلوات۔
Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Sayyid Hasan Rizvi, respected elders, brothers, sisters in Iman, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Surah Fatiha is requested for all the names listed on the screen and Kul Arwahil Mu'minin wal Mu'minat Sawab al-Fatiha. Ayat al-Mayyujibun is requested for all the names on the screen and whoever is in need of it here and elsewhere. Let us all recite it together. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Amman yujibul mustarra idha da'ah wa yakshifu su. Amman yujibul mustarra idha da'ah wa yakshifu su. Amman yujibul مضطر إذا دعاه ويكشف السوء أمن يجيب المضطر إذا دعاه ويكشف السوء أمن يجيب المضطر إذا دعاه ويكشف السوء اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. Now let us invite Sayyid Hasan Rizvi to recite tonight's majlis. Par Muhammadin wa ali Muhammad salawat. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad.
أعوذ بالله السميع العليم من الشيطان اللعين الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم وبه نستعين لا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم والحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين خاتم النبيين شفيع المذنبين رحمة للعالمين سيدنا والنبينا أبي القاسم المصطفى محمد ثم الصلاة والسلام والتحية والإكرام على أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين المظلومين ولعنة الله على أعدائهم أجمعين من الأولين والآخرين إلى قيام يوم الدين أما بعد. Mu'mineen, mu'minat, brothers and sisters in Islam and Iman, Salamun alaykum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Last session, which was Monday night, I believe Monday night or Tuesday night, we talked about one specific series for these different shahadat and majalis that we are going to have in Muharram and Safar. And we wanted to continue our normal Thursday night sessions and series for Thursday nights, right? To go through adopting an Islamic lifestyle. There was some feedback that was given that people wanted to hear more of these sessions, more of the sessions that we started with, analyzing the sermon of Sayyida Zainab alayha salatu wasalam. And they said that for Muharram and Safar, if possible, to try to go through that instead on all the different nights, including Thursday nights, and then wait till, let's say, after Safar to continue with the normal session. So, because there was some feedback given, we'll decide to go with that direction. So I've changed a little bit of the information around, the direction that I wanted to take it. So there's going to be a few new points that I'll be mentioning tonight, inshallah, before we move on to some newer discussions about analyzing and commenting on this sermon in Kufa. Additionally, as was mentioned before, we won't be having a quiz, just because logistically it's could be a bit difficult in these 2 months. But we will still allow Slido questions to come. So what we'll do, inshallah, the Slido should be opened up, so you can ask your questions, submit them, and then the following session, whether it would be, for example, Saturday night for the Shahada, or for the next Thursday night, or whatever program comes up next, at the beginning of that session, we'll try to go through maybe one or maybe two of those questions that you may have. And again, related to the topic that we're addressing here, about analyzing the sermon of Sayyidah Zainab alayha salam in Kufa regarding the traits of those who had betrayed and left Imam Hussein alayhi salatu wassalam. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad. So first, let's start off with the summary from last time, and then we'll discuss what we want to do for tonight. We wanted to figure out what were the traits that the Kufans specifically, but other Muslims who had sent letters to the Imam, those who had betrayed the Imam, what traits and characteristics did they exhibit that led them to actually betraying the Imam, to not be able to join him on Ashura in Karbala. And we said that, we can analyze it a lot of different ways. One of the more precise ways would probably be if we look at the sermon of Sayyidah Zainab alayha salatu wasalam in Kufa, as she starts to address the Kufans directly based on the qualities that they exhibited. So last time we focused on one part, which was the part where she quotes a verse of Quran, right? From chapter 16, Surah An-Nahl, verse 92, where in the Quran, Allah gives this analogy about a woman who spins yarn tightly for half the day, and then the other half of the day, she unwinds it, right? So she was known, this is based on a real story of a woman in Mecca, that she had wasted her time doing this. She was known as the fool of Mecca, or the idiot of Mecca. So people knew about this story. It was kind of like a meme. So when Allah brings it, the Arabs understood that Allah was trying to tell them that if you break your oaths, if you break your treaties, you break your alliances for certain reasons, you're just like that fool of Mecca, just like that lady. So we see that Sayyidah Zainab alayha salam uses this same analogy, saying that the Kufans were the same thing, certain Kufans. That they did the same thing, they were just like this fool of Mecca, this foolish lady of Mecca, who built up their oath, they talked too much, they bit off more than they could chew, they pledged their allegiance to the Imam, they invited him, and then they betrayed him and they allowed him to become shaheed. And according to one Mufassir, this is the same thing that Sayyidah Fatima alayha salatu wasalam, Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. She had also, in one version of the Khutbah al-Fadq, had said about those who did not follow through on their bay'ah and allegiance to Amir al-Mu'mineen. So we see that this is, in a sense, following in the footsteps of her mother. And some other Mufassirin and scholars mention that this same sort of idea of oath breaking had always existed in Kufa, as we know the history, right? Imam Hussein alayhi salam, the reason he has to send Muslim ibn Aqil first is because he says, I know how you treated my brother, Imam Hasan. Imam Hasan also knows, I know how you treated my father, Imam Ali. Imam Ali also knows what happened to Rasulullah, that there's a trait within Muslims, sometimes specifically in certain regions, where they don't follow through, that they go back on their word. So we said that the kind of tafsir of this verse is that people sometimes end up spending all of this effort. They spend lots of time, money, they spend resources, they build these alliances, they make these treaties, they sign agreements in order to what? After doing all that work, they break them, they go against them, and then they end up joining and forming new ones. Why? For the sake of material and personal benefit. That's why. Because they found a better company, they found a better agreement, they found a better organization, a better company, a better country, whatever. With Rasulullah, they found that the Quraysh were better off, they had more manpower, so Muslims left Islam and switched to them. With Imam Ali, they left him and joined the Khawarij, or just didn't want to fight altogether. With Imam Hasan, same thing, they joined up with Muawiyah. And we see with Imam Hussein, the same thing had taken place. Now what I'd like to do tonight, something that we left off last time, is to more accurately apply it for us right now. We obviously are trying to build a relationship with the Imam of our time, Imam al-Hujjah, Ajjalallahu ta'ala, farajuhu sharif. Allahumma salli ala Muhammadin wa ala Muhammad. And it's clear none of us want to be, as we say, Ahlul Kufa, with the Imam of our time. right? Of course, we pledge our allegiance to him, but we don't want to abandon him. So it makes sense that we analyze this specific situation of breaking oaths, breaking promises, to see what exactly happened to the Kufans and other Muslims who pledged their allegiance, what was going on. We're going to reapply this idea to history, to what happened in Karbala and Kufa, and then analyze it and then apply it for us in this age with our relationship with the Imam of the time. Hopefully in that case or in that sense, we'll be able to figure out what can we do and what can we really work on while we're awaiting the Imam, as we like to say. People always ask, what do I do while the Imam's in ghaibah? Well, here's one thing. We have spiritual diseases, community issues that we all need to work on together. And this way, when Karbala becomes an institution that we can learn from, this becomes one of the best places, coming from the mouth and the wisdom and the hikmah of Sayyidah Zainab alayha salatu wassalam. Salawat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. So first, let's go and let's reapply this idea of oath breaking, treaty breaking, alliance breaking when it comes to the people of Kufa. Now, again, I know that there's a lot of disagreement, there's a lot of historical discussion, polemical discussions like Sunni Shia stuff about the people of Kufa, Shias and this and that. Like I said last time, I don't want to go into all of those historical points because I don't think they're very valid from the other side. Some of those points I will address tonight, right, in a few moments, but I'm not going to go really in depth into the history. But in a few minutes, you'll see why there happens to be some confusion and why some people end up saying these things like the Shia of Imam Hussein in Kufa, they're the ones who betrayed and abandoned the Imam. But we'll see that that's kind of just a made-up sort of story or a misconception, sometimes even on our behalf. So we know from the mimbar, from the sort of mimbari history that you and I hear every year, that we know the Kufans, they wrote letters to the Imam. We know that. Once Muawiyah had died, and they learned that in Mecca, the Imam had ended up there, leaving Medina. So they had heard the news that Imam Hussein alayhi salam was not pledging allegiance, and he wasn't giving bay'ah to Yazid. So when people heard this, they sent the letters to Imam and called him to Kufa. They said, come, we'll support you, and we want you to lead us. This is usually the most that we hear, that there is thousands and thousands of letters. Imam tried to come, Hur took him away to Karbala, and that was the end of the story, and the Kufans who should have supported him abandoned him. There's a few details that I think are really necessary for us to know about these letters. Now, I don't want to go word for word, but I want to analyze it a little bit in perhaps maybe a way we haven't heard before. You see, it wasn't just that 16,000 or 12,000 letters were just sent all at once, and there's like this big package of mail that came to the Imam's door. It wasn't like that. Most historians say that all of these letters ended up coming in different phases. Usually they say they came in 3 major phases, right? Little by little. So what I want to talk about first is those 3 phases and talk about how the groups involved in each and every phase were different and the content of their letters actually differed as well. So the first phase was a very, very small group of what we would call true Shias of Ali, true Shias of Imam Hasan, Imam Hussein, the true followers of the Ahlul Bayt. This small group, right? So don't even think about thousands, right? They would gather in houses, right? In small houses. So we can't think of huge, huge numbers here. A very small amount of true believers, true followers, willing to give up everything. There, they discussed with some of the head ulama of the Shias at that time in Kufa, and they said, look, you know what's happening with Muawiyah and Yazid? Our Imam has said he's not going to give bay'ah to Yazid. It's time we call him and we'll support him and we want him to be our Imam here and we can start the movement from Kufa. So right there, some of the tribal leaders would say, look, do not write these letters unless you are absolutely sure that you will defend your Imam to the death. That no matter what happens, you will support your Imam. And all of those in that group, they agreed. So those true followers, they sent out that first group of letters. After that, then a larger group then came together, kind of a mix and match of different people in Kufa. It wasn't, let's say, the majority, but a sizable amount. And they were a mix of what we would normally now call Shias and what we would normally now call Sunnis. Now, most of you, if you don't know the history, this idea of Shia Sunni doesn't really exist yet. This comes much, much later on, right, in the kind of Abbasid times. So this is just, kind of a very interesting period in terms of people's identities. But there were some who had, a few who really understood the maqam and the status of the Ahlul Bayt, and those were the ones who already sent their letters. Then you had some who were, they loved the Ahlul Bayt, they had a special affection and affinity for them, but maybe they didn't recognize them as being ma'soom and perfect, for example. Maybe they just thought they were the best people on earth at that time. There was different opinions at that point. It wasn't so clear, as some of us may think. And of course, we had many who just believed and followed whoever seemed to be in power at the time. They were kind of confused about how power politics and religious ideas really played out. They were kind of confused. So a sort of mix of lovers of the Ahlul Bayt, not necessarily followers, but lovers. They went and they wrote a kind of, the next group of thousands of letters. Then finally, the third group came. And this is where you see now a huge amount. Some would say the majority of the people of Kufa now, they've went around, they've been petitioned, right? The small group petitioned the second group. Then these two groups came together and they petitioned the larger people and the majority of Kufa. They said, look, we are calling to Imam Hussein, or to Hussein ibn Ali, to come and lead us. So this final group, they said, okay, fine, this sounds good. We'll also, sign your agreements, we'll sign your letters, and we'll send them as well. Fine. Most historians say that this group was largely non-Shia in the way we would understand it. They weren't really lovers of the Ahlul Bayt. They weren't followers of the Ahlul Bayt. They said, okay, there's this person Hussein, he's grandson of the Prophet, good guy, great guy. He wants to do this stuff, okay, fine. Now here is where these things matter. Here's where these phases and groups matter. The content of their letters reflect their ideas differently. That's the next point we want to discuss. If you can recite as-salawat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. So the first group we said were these true followers of the Ahlul Bayt, the ones who were ready and willing to give up everything for the love of Imam Hussein. So the content of their letters, the focus of their letters, the reason that they're calling the Imam is for divine justice. They are saying, and you can see it in the words, now again, I don't want to bring everything because it'll take up too much time, but for anybody who's interested, you can go and look at the various books that are out there, that they say, look, we know that you are the true Khalifatullah fil ard. You are the Hujjatullah fil ard. You are the rightful leader. You are the rightful proof of God on earth. You are the divine representative of God. You are the perfect one. So they praise Allah in their letters, they praise the Prophet, then they praise all of the Imams. And they say, we've been waiting for somebody to come and, implement divine law on earth now, when it's been gone for so long. So that's what they were calling for the Imam as the rightful, true representative of Allah on earth. Please come and lead the movement. That was the first sort of smaller minority group of true followers of the Ahlul Bayt. Now that second group, where a bunch of other letters were sent. Now, again, they loved the Ahlul Bayt, but their main reason for sending the letters wasn't really divine justice. It was what we, of course, nowadays call social justice. They saw that there was corruption within the Umayyad dynasty. They saw that there was injustice, there was corruption and oppression, there was issues economically with wealth being stuck in the hands of the elite, right? Innocent people being killed and imprisoned. So this was their main issue. Now the divine justice thing wasn't really the first thing on their mind. For them it was more about social equality or social justice or economic issues. That was their main thing. Now, is that important? Of course it's important. But they didn't necessarily care, nor did they understand or agree that the Imam Hussein, was the divine leader on earth. A lot of those letter writers didn't really have that sort of idea. Right? Some may have, but not everybody did. And even if they did, that wasn't reflected in their letters. They weren't with that first main smaller group. That's the second. Now the third one, which is this huge sort of majority of general people in Kufa, and sort of the tribal leaders, what we would say the non-Shia tribal leaders that were there, the elites that were there. In their letters, they were very strict and to the point, very direct. So I'll give you just a quote in English, I'll leave the Arabic. And to the Imam, they're saying, gardens have become green and fruits are ripe now. So come whenever you want, whenever you decide, since your soldiers are ready, waiting to help you. Now, it may not be obvious in the kind of word and verbiage that they're using here, but this group, they didn't care about divine justice. They didn't care about social justice. The only thing they cared about was personal benefit and personal justice. All they saw was that, hey, the Umayyad Empire, or the extension of it in Kufa, is going to collapse. The next person in charge is going to be Hussein ibn Ali. We need to make sure we're in his good books. Since everybody else is writing letters, let's jump on the bandwagon, let's do the same thing. Let's write the letters, because if he sees our names on these letters, then when he comes, he takes over the government, then we'll get these great positions, we'll get all that war booty, right, all that kind of stuff. So they were purely in it for worldly, material, financial, political gains, that's it. And this was again, there's a difference of opinion about the number, but let's just say a good amount of people who had this sort of idea. So, when some people say, oh, people in your Shias are abandoning the Imam, they're the ones who killed them, there were so many individuals who were of this camp. These were the same types who were the ones on Ashura, in front of the Imam, ready to, unfortunately, cut his head off. These are the ones who were there. Right? Now, when we talk about the response and the adherence to the Imam, it's going to be what? In proportion, in accordance to how they actually wrote their letters and which way they wrote to the Imam. How did they give bay'ah to the Imam? If you keep in mind the different groups, the phases, you keep in mind the content and their focus, then you can understand exactly what happened to those various groups up until Ashura and after, and the ones who are being talked to and being addressed by Sayyidah Zainab, by Kulthum, by Imam Sajjad, and everybody else when they're coming through Kufa. You can now understand what types of people they're addressing there. So now let's break this down and let's see exactly how the tactics worked of Ibn Ziyad on these three different groups. Salawat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. So for the first group, the ones who were truly ready to give up everything, Ibn Ziyad's tactics were clear. He said, look, we can't allow them to survive. So he killed many of them. He imprisoned many of them. Or many of them, because they knew when they realized that Yazid will send somebody here, they left Kufa immediately because they knew it would never be safe again once Yazid found out what was going on. So somebody like, for example, Mukhtar. We know Mukhtar was, according to some, a true follower of the Ahlul Bayt, but he was imprisoned right away because they knew he was a powerful figure and they didn't want him to do anything. Right? Of course, some were able, because they played the right moves at the beginning, they ended up with the Imam. Like Habib ibn Muzahir. He was one of the first to write a letter, and he was blessed with the tawfiq to be able to join the Imam in Karbala as well. And inshallah, if we have time, we'll mention his masa'ib later tonight as a reminder for us. Now, the second and third group, I'm going to mix these two together because various tactics had worked on these second and third group, right? The ones that were looking for social justice and the ones that were looking for personal, worldly, dunyawi gains. So, Ibn Ziyad had, a multifaceted sort of tactics and approaches against them. One was what we always hear, fear and intimidation, right? He would threaten everybody. He would kill family members in front of, he would kill family members in front of their families, right? So he'd kill women and children in front of their husbands and fathers to scare them into, you will not join Hussein. He would torture people. And when this group, although they loved social justice a lot, they wanted the Imam to come to lead this movement, when they saw what was going to happen to their family, they said, you know what, this is too much for us. Imam, we love you, but we can't sacrifice our families for this. We want to see equality. We want to see justice. We don't like the corruption that's within the Umayyad Empire. But this is a bit too much for us. We can't handle this. So they left the Imam, they left Muslim ibn Aqil. They couldn't handle it. And again, sometimes they're a bit too harsh. How many of us would be able to deal with this sort of fear and intimidation? And we'd love to say, yes, Imam, we would handle everything. A person threatens your family, we'll probably do whatever it takes to make sure our family is kept safe. So we have to be careful of being so harsh on them all the time of, oh, these bad people from Kufa. No, these are legitimate concerns. We can see a recent modern day example of Saddam, Mal'un. The Shias had tried to rise up over and over again, but what did Saddam do with his vicious tactics? He had threatened people. He had intimidated them. I mean, the stories are so, abhorrent that I can't even say some of the things he had done on the minbar. It's that bad. And it's interesting. One of the other tactics that Saddam had used, it's almost as if he just took it right out of Muawiyah and Yazid's playbook and Ibn Ziyad's playbook. One of the other things that Ibn Ziyad had done is that he had forced many of the known followers of the Imam into a forced draft. He said, either you die or you join Umar ibn Saad's army. Those are your two choices. So because of that kind of life or death choice, they ended up joining the army of Umar ibn Saad. And they stood against the Imam because of that. It was forced conscription, a forced draft. Now the last one, again, there's other ones, there's always power and money, things like that. That I think, I don't need to explain too much. Another one which I think is important for us to also understand is those who succumbed and fell for the propaganda that Ibn Ziyad pushed out. You say, what kind of propaganda? What Ibn Ziyad did is he took all these different elders, the ones who were well-known, scholars of the community, so to speak. They would go around to those who were confused or who were in doubt or who were kind of ready to support the Imam or were a bit unsure. So these leaders and scholars would come and say, look, why are you going against Yazid? He's a wonderful individual. Are you going against the ijma', the consensus of the community? And these people would say, what do you mean? So-and-so tribal leader from Mecca, they gave their allegiance to Ibn Ziyad, and to Yazid, sorry. So-and-so leaders from Mecca, they also gave their bay'ah to Yazid. These leaders from Basra, they pledged their allegiance to Yazid. These specific leaders in Kufa and Shah, etc. All these leaders, these great scholars have pledged their allegiance to Yazid. He has legitimacy. He has real authority among the Arabs. Why are you going against that? And because of that sort of arrogance, that pre-Islamic Jahiliyyah nature of the Arabs, they said, yeah, but that's what we deem and term as legitimacy, right? He's achieved quorum, right, as some people like to say. He got enough electoral votes. They said, okay, that's fine, right? Democracy wins. He got it. And this worked on some people, right? So all of these we can see in modern day as well, but all of these sort of tools were used by Ibn Ziyad, but it seemed to affect those who weren't really the true followers of the Ahlul Bayt. And even the ones who were, let's say, on the fence, they did have love, those kind of tactics are ones that you and I would probably fall for as well. They're very, very difficult to deal with. And the other ones, you see, are purely because of worldly issues, purely out of ignorance, purely out of material benefit. So once we understand all these different tactics that were used, now we can take this, tie this back to ourselves, and apply it to our relationship with the Imam of the time. After a salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. So the main question we have to ask is, okay, if I want to apply the betrayal of those Muslims with the Imam at that time, then I need to figure out what would lead to my betrayal of the Imam right now. Well, we looked at the different types of groups that wrote letters to the Imam. We talked about the different contents of the letters they wrote to the Imam and how different tactics worked against them, and that tactic led to them breaking their oath and breaking their allegiance with Imam Hussein. So that same thing will apply to us too then. We, to some degree or another, have pledged our allegiance and given bay'ah to the Imam of the time. We also can be, divided into these groups as well. But first, somebody might say, Hasan, we don't really write letters to the Imam. Nobody does that. What exactly do you mean by, content of our letters? I said, well, there's two different ways I think we can look at it. One is actually we do write letters to the Imam. Arida, ahsant. Arida or ariza. At least on the 15th Sha'ban or various other days or different wiladat or other occasions where it's recommended to, people write aridas. And technically, according to some scholars, you can write it anytime you want. Many ulama even recommend keeping a daily journal and writing constant letters to the Imam. Now, I can't advise that to you because I don't do that yet, but if you're better than me, which you probably are, then you can start doing that. But some say, keep that daily journal and keep that communication with the Imam. So that's you communicating with the Imam directly. Now, there's a non-physical way as well, a spiritual way. And we are praying for that every day. When we recite, for example, almost at the end of every program, dua faraj. Allahumma ajjal li waliyik al-faraj. Another dua that sometimes you recite in qunut. Allah, please hurry up and get your imam back here, we need him. Right? To kind of paraphrase it. You know, we can't wait any longer. We are basically saying we pledge allegiance to your imam, we want him to come back. Hurry up and bring him back. Okay. So we have been writing him letters, either physically or spiritually. We're calling him. The same way the Muslims in Kufa and other places like Basra wrote letters and called their imam, we are doing the same thing. So in that sense, there's no different so far. Now, what about the reason that we're calling the imam? The content of our dua and the content of our ariba, our letters to the imam. That's the next thing that we have to examine. If you can recite as-salawat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. And this will be the point we end on, and then we'll move to Masa'ib, inshallah. So, before we talked about those looking for divine justice, looking for social justice, and then material gains. I'm going to flip it around and go the other way. In terms of the way that we write our ariba, that we make our du'as, whether it's to Allah directly or to the imam, either way, right? Some of us, it's only about material concerns. That's the reason that we call the imam. Not just the 12th imam, but any imam. We go for ziyarah, we ask for material gains, material benefits. Now, it's not haram to do so. You can ask Bab al-Hawa'ij for a new car, and he'll probably get it for you, inshallah, right? It's not a big deal. But the problem is that we end up treating Allah and His Ahlul Bayt like genies in a lamp, right? Like Santa Claus. That's what our arida becomes, right? Dear Imam, I need a new house, I need a new car, I need a new job. Please get them to me soon. I love you. Khudafis, right? That's, I mean, I'm saying it like a child, but I guarantee if I took an average adult's letter, I'm sure I'd find the same thing there. Imam, my portfolio is not doing really well right now, please. We're laughing, but I guarantee most of us have written these kind of things before. It's okay, you can write these things. Inshallah, it'll get taken care of. But you can see, if that's the kind of concerns we have, and that's what we're calling the imam for, then we're going to be, the tactics used against us will be the same as well. The reason we'll break our oath, our treaty and allegiance and bay'ah to the imam is for the same thing. If somebody else comes along, some other group or organization or society or whatever, and they offer us those material benefits instead of the imam or Allah, then we'll probably take it. And they say that one of the things that the Dajjal will do when he comes is that he'll say, look, all those things that your imam can't offer, I'm going to offer you resources, I'll offer you money, I'll offer you security, all these things. That's what you want, I have it for you. I read your Ariyah too, I got it. So that's the first thing we have to be careful of, is whether or not our oath, our allegiance, our bay'ah is based on material needs. Salawat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. The second, no, if I start this, it's going to go too long, and I don't want to take up too much time. So, the second and third we'll mention on our next session, which will be on Saturday night for the Shahada of the fourth Imam. And after that, we'll go on to the next part of the sermon of Sayyid Zainab alayhi salatu wasalam, and more of the qualities, the negative qualities and spiritual diseases that exist within the Muslims back then, and may exist within us right now, that you and I are trying our best in this month of Muharram, in this month of Safar, to completely destroy, so that our allegiance to the Imam is never broken. Salawat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. So I mentioned that I wanted to recite the Masa'ib of Habib tonight. And the reason that I wanted to do that is because all of us want to be a part of that first group. Those true lovers of the Ahlul Bayt. You know, if we were there in Kufa, or in Basra, or in Mecca, or Medina, you and I would really hope that we were one of the first ones to join the caravan of the Imam. That we were the first ones to write the letters, the ones who were able to give their life, the ones able to do whatever it takes to get to our Imam, the object of our love and affection. But you see, this is not for everybody. Allah doesn't grant that sort of tawfiq. He doesn't grant the mulaqat, the meeting with the Imam, the meeting with His beloved, Allah's beloved on earth, the Imam. He doesn't give that to just anybody. He only gives it to those who have that same sort of hub and mahabba for His lover as well. And that's why we talk about, it's not just having love for the Ahlul Bayt, but having mawadda. It should go both ways. When it goes both ways, it's not just you having this intense love for the Ahlul Bayt, but because of that intense love, the Ahlul Bayt reciprocate and they love you back. And the same way that when we call forth and we want the Imam to come back, the Imam says, I want to be with the Shia like you as well. And is there anybody else that represents this more beautifully than Habib ibn Muzahir? We know that he was amongst the first to write these letters. But for various different issues, he ended up getting stuck within this house arrest, within the blockade, within the curfew that Ibn Ziyad had imposed. But his heart was always in Karbala. And now you see, for any other person, it wouldn't have made a difference for Imam Hussein. But we see Imam Hussein specifically, when he's asked by Sayyid Zainab on the second or third night of Muharram, when she asked, Ya Imam, Ya Akhi, right now, different troops, different battalions of Yazid are coming every day with thousands and thousands of more troops. They're stomping their horses throughout and they're scaring our children. Do we have anybody to come to us? Do we have any reinforcements? Do you have anybody that is your Habib like this? That's somebody that loves you like this? He says, Na'am, I have a Habib. He writes a letter directly to Habib. We know the story. Habib kisses the letter. Just from the fragrance of the letter, he knows who's writing this. He kisses the letter and he, now in the middle of the night, because وَمَن يَتَّقِ اللَّهِ مَجْعَلْ يَجَدَهُ مَخْرَجًا. If you love Allah, you have taqwa, you love His Imam, Allah will give you a way out. Allah gave Habib a way out of that curfew, a way out of those blockades and those restrictions. He gave Habib a way to his beloved, his mahbub, his Imam. And Habib made it there. And they say that the crowd, the camp of the Ahlul Bayt, this was the first time they had seen happiness and joy in a few nights. Ajrakum ala Allah. This is why Habib also had the honor of defending the Imam in Salah as well, of giving up his life so that the Imam could offer his Dhuhr prayers. But one thing which I think breaks the heart is that when we know after Karbala, after Ashura, as the caravan is being taken back to Kufa, we know the heads were being taken on spears. Now, many of you remember that Habib had a son as well, and his son was left behind in Kufa. Because his father, Habib, had left in the middle of the night, he had no idea. He didn't know what had happened to his father. But when he heard these loud sounds in the streets of Kufa, he went outside. And one by one, he started to see a sight that he never thought he'd see in his life. He saw women, the women of Ahlul Bayt, dressed in a way that they would never have dressed before, uncovered in a way that they had never been uncovered. He had seen the women and children looking like slaves. He had seen men, only one man, Imam Sajjad, in chains. He had seen the cries and the tears of the Ahlul Bayt. He had seen the heads on the spears being taken one by one. He sees them over and over again. And at one point his eyes lock onto one head and he says, is this the head of my father Habib? He grabs his companions. He says, help me get the head of my father back. He goes, they fight the soldier that was holding the head of his father. They get the head of his father back. They get the head of Habib. He sits down on the ground. He has the head of Habib in his lap and he's crying and calling out and he's saying, Ya Abata, oh my father, it's not fair. You can never put a son into a position like this. It's not fair for a father to put his son in a position where he has to see his father in such a situation like this. If we were there in Kufa, we would say, Ya Habib, be careful what you say. Ya Habib, do you know that same Imam Sajjad that you were just looking at, the one who's been in shackles and chains, who's sitting with an iron collar, he has been walking and walking with looking at the head of his father the whole time, and he'll have to stare at it from Karbala to Kufa, from Kufa to Sham. The whole time Imam Sajjad is praying, Allah, please give me one chance to just hold the head of my father in my hands. على لعنة الله على قوم الظالمين وسيعلم الذين ظلموا أي منقلب ينقلبون إنا لله وإنا إليه راجعون رضا بقضائه وتسليما لأمره. ماتم حسين.
یا حسین یا حسین یا حسین یا حسین قید خانے میں ہند نے کہا قید خانے میں ہند نے کہا سر اٹھاؤ تو بیویو ذرا قید خانے میں ہند نے کہا قید خانے میں ہند نے کہا سر اٹھاؤ تو بیویو ذرا میں لائی ہوں بچوں کے لیے میں لائی ہوں بچوں کے لیے کھانا لائی ہوں آپ کے لیے کھاؤ اس میں سے آپ تھوڑا سا کھاؤ اس میں سے آپ تھوڑا سا سر اٹھاؤ تو بیویو ذرا ہند نے کہا قید خانے میں ہند نے کہا سر اٹھاؤ تو وارثوں کے سر کس جگہ کٹے وارثوں کے سر کس جگہ کٹے کون سی خطا پہ آپ ہے لٹے آؤ بادتی کھول دور سن لاؤ ہاتھوں کی کھول دور سن سر اٹھاؤ تو بیویو ذرا قید خانے میں لکھانے میں لاؤ ہاتھوں کی کھول دور سن لاؤ ہاتھوں کی کھول دور سن بدلو کے اجلے پہ ہے رن سر چھپانے کو لائی ہوں ردا سر چھپانے کو لائی ہوں ردا سر اٹھاؤ تو بیویو ذرا کہا قید خانے میں ہند نے کہا سر اٹھاؤ تو بیویو ذرا آپ کے ہے کیا وارثوں کا نام آپ کے ہے کیا وارثوں کا نام میرے فاطمہ کچھ کرو کلام ٹکڑے ہوتا ہے دل خدا گواہ ٹکڑے ہوتا ہے دل خدا گواہ سر اٹھاؤ تو بیویو ذرا قید خانے میں ہند نے کہا قید خانے میں ہند نے کہا سر اٹھاؤ تو پھر سکینہ کو گودی میں لیا پھر سکینہ کو گودی میں لیا پیار کر کے اور اس سے یہ کہا قید کس لیے آپ کو کیا قید کس لیے آپ کو کیا سر اٹھاؤ تو بیویو ذرا قید خانے میں ہند نے کہا قید خانے میں ہند نے کہا سر اٹھاؤ تو ہند نے کہا پھر سکینہ کو ہند نے کہا پھر سکینہ کو کچھ خبر نہیں کیا کہوں تجھے ہند نے کہا کچھ تو دو پتا ہند نے کہا کچھ تو دو پتا سر اٹھاؤ تو بیویو ذرا قید خانے میں ہند نے کہا قید خانے میں ہند نے کہا سر اٹھاؤ تو بیویو ذرا قید خانے میں ہند نے کہا سر اٹھاؤ تو بیویو ذرا فاتحہ مع صلوات صلی اللہ
دعاء فرج اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم اللهم كن لوليك الحجة ابن الحسن صلواتك عليه وعلى آبائه في هذه الساعة وفي كل ساعة وليا وحافظا وغائدا وناصرا ودليلا وعينا حتى تسكنه أرضك توعا وتمتئه فيها طويلا برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين. اللهم صل على السلام عليك يا رسول الله، السلام عليك يا نبي الله، السلام عليك يا عمير المؤمنين، السلام عليك يا فاطمة الزهراء سيدتي نساء العالمين، السلام عليك يا حسن المجتبى، السلام عليك يا وارث آدم صفوة الله، السلام عليك يا وارث نوح نبي الله، السلام عليك يا وارث إبراهيم خليل الله، السلام عليك يا وارث موسى كليم الله، السلام عليك يا وارث عيسى روح الله، السلام عليك يا وارث محمد حبيب الله، السلام عليك يا وارث عمير المؤمنين عليه السلام ولي الله، السلام عليك يا ابن محمد المصطفى، السلام عليك يا ابن علي المرتضى، السلام عليك يا ابن فاطمة الزهراء، السلام عليك يا ابن خديجة الكبرى، السلام عليك يا ثار الله وابن ثار والوتر الموتور، أشهد أنك قد أقمت الصلاة وآتيت الزكاة وأمرت بالمعروف ونحيت عن المنكر وأطعت الله ورسوله حتى أتاك اليقين، فلعن الله أمة قتلتك، ولعن الله أمة ظلمتك، ولعن الله أمة سمعت بذلك فرضيت به. يا مولاي يا أبا عبد الله، أشهد أنك كنت نورا في الأسلاب الشامخة والأرحام المتحرة، لم تنجسك الجاهلية بأنجاسها ولم تلبسك من مدلحمات ثيابها، وأشهد أنك من دعائم الدين وأركان المؤمنين، وأشهد أنك الأئمة البر التقي الرذي الزكي الحادي المهدي، وأشهد أن الأئمة من ولدك كلمة التقوى وعلام الهدى والعروة الوثقى والحجة على أهل الدنيا، وأشهد الله وملائكته وأنبياءه ورسله أني بكم مؤمن وبيا بكم موقن بشرائع ديني وخواتيم عملي، وقلبي لقلبكم سلم وعمري لعمركم متبع، صلوات الله عليكم وعلى أرواحكم وعلى أجسادكم وعلى أجسامكم وعلى شاهدكم وعلى غائبكم وعلى ظاهركم وعلى باطنكم. السلام عليك يا ابن رسول الله، السلام عليك يا ابن نبي الله، السلام عليك يا ابن عمير المؤمنين، السلام عليك يا ابن الحسين الشهيد، السلام عليك أيها الشهيد، السلام عليك أيها المظلوم وابن المظلوم، لعن الله أمة قتلتك، ولعن الله أمة ظلمتك، ولعن الله أمة سمعت بذلك فرضيت به. السلام عليكم يا أولياء الله وأحباه، السلام عليكم يا أسفياء الله وأوداعه، السلام عليكم يا أنصار دين الله، السلام عليكم يا أنصار رسول الله، السلام عليكم يا أنصار أمير المؤمنين، السلام عليكم يا أنصار فاطمة الزهراء سيدتي نساء العالمين، السلام عليكم يا أنصار أبي محمد الحسن بن علي الولي الناسه، السلام عليكم يا أنصار أبا عبد الله بأبي أنتم وعمي تبتم وتابت الأرض التي فيها دفنتم وفزتم فوزا عظيما فيا ليتني كنت معكم فأفوز معكم. السلام عليك يا أبا الفضل العباس بن أمير المؤمنين. السلام عليك يا ابن سيد الوسيين. السلام عليك يا ابن أول القوم إسلاما وأقدمهم إيمانا وأقومهم بدين الله وأخوتهم على الإسلام. أشهد لك أن نصحت لله ولرسوله ولأخيك فنعم الأخ المواسي. فلعن الله أمة قتلتك ولعن الله أمة ظلمتك ولعن الله أمة استحلت منك المخارم وانتهكت حرمة الإسلام. فنعم الصابر المجاهد المحامي الناصر والأخ الدافي والنخيل المجيب إلى طاعة ربي الراغب فيما زهد فيه غيره من الثواب الجزيل والثناء الجميل. والحقك الله بدرجة آبائك في جنات النعيم. السلام عليكم يا أهل بيت النبوة جميعا ورحمة الله وبركاته. السلام عليك يا غريب الغرباء وبعيد المدى السلطان أبا الحسن علي بن موسى الرضا. كن شفيعنا وشفيع والدينا في يوم الجزاء ورحمة الله وبركاته. السلام عليك يا حجة الله ابن الحسن يا صاحب الأسر والزمان سيدي الأمان الأمان الأمان. السلام عليك يا خليفة الرحمن. السلام عليك يا شريك القرآن. السلام عليك يا كعبة الإيمان. السلام عليك يا إمامنا وإمام الإنس والجان. السلام عليكم يا أهل بيت النبوة جميعا ورحمة الله وبركاته. صلوات الله.